Welcome to the lessons on narrative elements. In this presentation, I'll talk about all the different narrative elements that will be on the final assessment. Let's start with something very basic. What is a narrative? Fortunately, there's a very easy answer to this. Narrative is just a fancy word for story. So if someone says narrative, just remember they're just saying story in a different word. Here's the elements we're going to go over. We're going to go over plot, conflict, setting, characters, protagonist, antagonist, and theme. These are the basic narrative elements. There are many more you can study if you want to expand your study, but you need to start at this foundation. Plot. Plot is what happens and how it happens in a narrative. I think of it as the events of a story in order. That's why I chose this image. First, next, then, after that, finally. The next important term to know about a narrative is the word characters. It just means the living beings in the narrative. That can be a talking dog in a film, or it could just be a person like you or me. Uh, that's the main character of a text. This also includes background characters that don't get a lot of time in the story. Which brings us to the main character. This word is called protagonist. Sounds fancy, but it basically just means the person who the story is predominantly talking about. Now, when you think about protagonist, you also have to think about the opposite, the antagonist, the person or thing that causes the problem for the protagonist. Sometimes it can be a person, like a villain in a superhero movie. That's often the antagonist. But sometimes an antagonist can also be a thing, like money, or greed, or hate. These things can cause problems for the protagonist, even if they aren't a person. Next important narrative element is setting. This is the time and the place where the action occurs. Setting can change throughout a story, but it is very important to the story because it can affect what happens and how the characters act. When you think about setting, think about what year it is, what time of year it is, what time of day is it, what's the weather like, what's the neighborhood like, what's the environment like. Because setting can make a big difference whether it's 5 in the morning, so that means it'd be dark outside. Or it might be noon when it's really bright and hot outside. That can really affect the way the characters act. Next one is conflict. Conflict is the possibly, in my opinion, the most important part of a story, or a narrative, as you should say. It is the struggle between opposing forces. Every narrative needs some kind of conflict. The conflict is what the protagonist wants to fix or what the protagonist wants to change, right? Your conflict could be that the villain is attacking me. Your conflict could be I need a job so I can buy new shoes. Your conflict could be I am flunking math and I need to pass. Conflict is anything that the character wants to change or fix. And then we come to theme. I like doing theme last because I feel like theme encompasses the whole story. Theme is the central message of the narrative. What is this story trying to express to you about life? What is it trying to help you learn about life? Let's look at some examples. Sometimes you might read a story that's all about family. It might give you the impression that family comes first. Family is the most important thing. Maybe you read a story about a romantic relationship, and by the end, you feel like love can conquer anything. Oftentimes, when you read about superheroes, the villain always loses, evil always loses. So it might come up with the theme that good always wins in the end. And very often, you'll read stories about someone wanting a lot of money, a lot of items, and in the end, it leads to them having some kind of failure, right? Something bad happens to them. And that might lead us to think of the theme that greed always leads to failure. So go back and watch this video a few times if you need to, and then go to the next slide or the next page and watch the review game, where you'll pause the screen and try to identify verbally the terms. So thank you. Enjoy the next slides.